Chapter 53 of 50 Years in the Church of Rome by Father Chiniquy. The 8th December 1854, Pope Pius IX was sitting on his throne. A triple crown of gold and diamonds was on his head, silk and Damascus red and white vestments on his shoulders. 500 mitred prelates were surrounding him, and more than 50,000 people were at his feet in the incomparable St. Peter's Church of Rome. After a few minutes of most solemn silence, a cardinal dressed with his purple robe left his seat and gravely walked towards the Pope, kneeled before him, and humbly prostrating himself at his feet said, "Holy Father, tell us if we can believe and teach that the Holy Mother of God, the Holy Virgin Mary, was immaculate in her conception." The Supreme Pontiff answered, "I do not know. Let us ask the light of the Holy Ghost." The cardinal withdrew. The Pope and the numberless multitude fell on their knees, and the harmonious choir sang the Veni Creator Spiritus. The last note of the sacred hymn had hardly rolled under the vaults of the temple when the same cardinal left his place and again advanced towards the throne of the pontiff, prostrated himself at his feet, and said, "Holy Father, tell us if the Holy Mother of God, the Blessed Virgin Mary, was immaculate in her conception." The Pope again answered, "I do not know. Let us ask the light of the Holy Ghost." And again the Veni Creator Spiritus was sung. The most solemn silence had a second time succeeded to the melodious sacred song, when again the eyes of the multitude were following the grave steps of the purple-robed cardinal advancing for the third time to the throne of the successor of St. Peter to ask him, "Holy Father, tell us if we can believe that the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, was immaculate." The Pope, as if he had just received a direct communication from God, answered with a solemn voice, "Yes, we must believe that the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, was immaculate in her conception. There is no salvation to those who do not believe this dogma." And with a loud voice, the Pope intoned the Te Deum. The bells of the 300 churches of Rome rang. The cannons of the citadel were fired. The last act of the most ridiculous and sacrilegious comedy of the world has ever seen was over. The doors of heaven were forever shut against those who would refuse to believe the anti-scriptural doctrine that there is a daughter of Eve who has not inherited the sinful nature of Adam, to whom the Lord said in his justice, "Dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return." Genesis 3:19. And of the children of whom the God of truth has said, "There is none righteous, no, not one, for all have sinned." Romans 3:10 and 23. We look in vain to the first centuries of the Church to find any traces of that human aberration. The first dark clouds which Satan had brought to mar the gospel truth on that subject appeared only between the 8th and 9th centuries, but in the beginning that error made very slow progress. Those who propagated it at first were a few ignorant fanatics whose names are lost in the night of the Dark Ages. It is only in the 12th century that it began to be openly preached by some brainless monks, but then it was opposed by the most learned men of the time. We have a very remarkable letter of St. Bernard to refute some monks of Lyons who were preaching this new doctrine. A little later, Peter Lombard adopted the views of the monks of Lyons and wrote a book to support that opinion. But he was refuted by St. Thomas Aquinas, who was justly considered by the Church of Rome as the best theologian of that time. After that, the celebrated order of the Franciscans used all their influence to persuade the world that Mary was immaculate in her conception. But they were vigorously opposed and refuted by the not less celebrated order of the Dominicans. These two learned and powerful bodies during more than a century attacked each other without mercy on that subject, and filled the world with their noise of their angry disputes, both parties calling their adversaries heretics. They succeeded in driving the Roman Catholics of Europe into two camps of fierce enemies. The Immaculate Conception became the subject of burning discussions not only between the learned universities, between the bishops and the priests and the nuns of those days, but it divided the families into two fiercely contending parties. It was discussed, attacked, and defended not only in the chairs of universities, in the pulpits of the cathedrals, but also in the fields and in the very streets of the cities. And when the two parties had exhausted the reasons which their ingenuity, their learning, or their ignorant fanaticism could suggest to prove or deny the Immaculate Conception, they often had recourse to the stick and to the sword to sustain their arguments. It will appear almost incredible today, but it is a fact. The greatest number of the large cities of Europe, particularly in Spain, were then reddened with the blood of the supporters and opponents of that doctrine. In order to put an end to these contests, which were troubling the peace of their subjects, the kings of Europe sent deputation after deputation to the popes to know from their infallible authority what to believe on the subject. Philip III and Philip V made what we may call supreme efforts to force the popes Paul V, Gregory XV, and Alexander VII to stop the shedding of blood and disarm the combatants by raising the opinion in favor of the Immaculate Conception to the dignity of a Catholic dogma. But they failed. The only answer they could get from the infallible head of the Church of Rome was that that dogma was not revealed in the Holy Scriptures and had never been taught by the apostles nor by the fathers, and had never been believed or preached by the Church of Rome as an article of faith. The only thing the popes could do to please the supplicant kings and bishops and nations of Europe in those days was to forbid both parties to call the other heretics, and to forbid to say that it was an article of faith which ought to be believed to be saved. At the Council of Trent, the Franciscans and all the partisans of the Immaculate Conception gathered their strength to have a decree in favor of the new dogma, but the majority of the bishops were visibly against that sacrilegious innovation, and they failed. It was reserved to the unfortunate Pius IX to drag the Church of Rome to that last limit of human folly. In the last century, a monk called Father Leonard had a dream in which he heard the Virgin Mary telling him that there would be an end to the wars in the world and to the heresies and schisms in the Church only after a pope should have obliged by a decree all the faithful to believe that she was immaculate in her conception. That dream, under the name of a celestial vision, had been extensively circulated by means of little tracts. Many believed it to be a genuine revelation from heaven, and unfortunately the good-natured but weak-minded Pius IX was among the number. When he was in exile in Gaeta, he had himself a dream which he took for a vision on the same subject. He saw the Virgin, who told him that he should go back to Rome and get an eternal peace for the Church only after he should have promised to declare that the Immaculate Conception was a dogma which everyone had to believe to be saved. He awoke from his dream much impressed by it, and the first thing he did when up was to make a vow to promulgate the new dogma as soon as he should be back to Rome, and the world has seen how he has fulfilled that vow. But by the promulgation of this new dogma, Pius IX, far from securing an eternal peace to his Church, far from destroying what he is pleased to call the heresies which are attacking Rome on every side, had done more to shake the faith of the Roman Catholics than all their enemies. By trying to force this new article of faith on the consciences of his people in a time that so many can judge for themselves and read the records of past generations, he has pulled down the strongest column which was supporting the whole fabric of his Church. For he forever destroyed the best arguments which the priests had to offer to the ignorant, deluded multitudes which they kept so abjectly tied to their feet. No words can sufficiently express the dignified and supreme contempt with which, before that epoch, the priests of Rome were speaking of the new articles of faith, the novelties of the arch-heretics Luther, Calvin, Knox, etc., etc. How eloquent were the priests of Rome before the 8th of December, 1854, when saying to their poor ignorant